In the long and storied history of American comedy, few names carry the weight, the thunder, and the sheer electricity of Don Rickles. He was not merely a comedian. He was a force of nature, a hurricane in a tuxedo, a man who could walk into any room on the planet, survey the crowd, and within 30 seconds reduce every single person in it to helpless, gasping laughter. He roasted kings and commoners alike. He teased presidents. He needled Frank Sinatra to his face and lived to tell the tale. He insulted Johnny Carson on national television and was invited back the very next week. Don Rickles made the entire world his audience, and the entire world, for the most part, loved him for it. But here is a truth that very few people fully understand about Don Rickles. Beneath the relentless barrage of insults, beneath the sharp tongue and the razor wit, there lived a man of deep loyalty, genuine warmth, and surprising sensitivity. The insults were never truly cruel. They were performances, elaborate, brilliant, perfectly timed performances built on a foundation of affection. Rickles always maintained that you cannot truly roast someone you don't care about. The joke only works when love is somewhere underneath it. And for the overwhelming majority of people he encountered across his remarkable 9-decade life, that love was absolutely there. Which makes it all the more fascinating and all the more telling that there was one person in Hollywood whom Don Rickles could never quite bring himself to warm up to. One name that, according to those closest to him, produced a reaction that was markedly different from the playful venom he reserved for his dearest friends. One individual whose very existence in the same room seemed to shift something in Rickles, not toward laughter, but toward something closer to genuine, unresolved frustration. That name was Denzel Washington. To understand why this particular tension mattered so much to Don Rickles, you first have to understand where he came from and what shaped him into the man he became. Donald J. Rickles was born on May 8, 1926, in the borough of Queens, New York City. He grew up in Jackson Heights, raised in a close-knit Jewish family where humor was not merely entertainment. It was survival. His father, Max Rickles, worked as an insurance salesman, and his mother, Etta, was the kind of woman who could spot her son's gifts long before the rest of the world caught on. From childhood, young Donald had a mouth on him that moved faster than his brain could keep up with, and a personality so outsized that even a modest Queens apartment couldn't quite contain it. After high school, Rickles enrolled at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York City, fully intending to pursue a career as a serious dramatic actor. He dreamed of Broadway. He dreamed of Hollywood films where he would play complex, tortured characters with gravity and depth. But life, as it so often does, had entirely different plans. His natural wit kept breaking through. He couldn't help himself. Even during the most serious scenes, some part of his brain was always searching for the angle, the crack, the perfectly timed moment to make someone double over laughing. His instructors noticed. His classmates noticed. Even Rickles himself, grudgingly and then gratefully, began to notice. Following his studies, he served in the United States Navy during World War II, stationed in the Pacific Theater aboard the USS Irene. Military service grounded him in ways that drama school never could. He witnessed sacrifice and camaraderie. He learned what it meant to be part of something larger than himself. And he discovered, in those long stretches of difficult waiting that defined military life, that laughter was perhaps the most powerful medicine human beings possess. When he returned home from the war, he carried that knowledge with him like a lantern. By the early 1950s, Rickles was grinding through the nightclub circuit, initially as a struggling dramatic actor who filled the gaps between failed auditions with bits of comedy. The comedy, quite simply, was better. Audiences didn't lean in for his dramatic monologues. They erupted when he turned his attention to them. When he pointed a finger at some unsuspecting fellow in the front row and with surgical precision dismantled the man's haircut, his choice of date, or the expression on his face. Something clicked. Something enormous and irreversible clicked. He made a decision that would alter the course of entertainment history. He leaned fully and completely into insult comedy. He would become a man who said what everyone else was thinking and said it faster, sharper, and funnier than anyone else dared to. He gave himself a nickname that operated as a perfect piece of ironic theater, Mr. Warmth, and the world embraced him completely. The moment that truly launched Don Rickles into the stratosphere of celebrity is one of the most repeated stories in all of Hollywood folklore, and it bears repeating here because it explains everything about who he was. In the late 1950s, Frank Sinatra, the chairman of the board, perhaps the most powerful and feared entertainer in America at the time, walked into a Miami nightclub where Rickles was performing. Every performer in that room would have bent over backwards to accommodate Sinatra, to flatter him, to make him feel like the god he essentially was in that era of show business. Don Rickles did the opposite. He pointed directly at Sinatra and began insulting him in front of the entire audience, joking about his ego, his entourage, his power, his very presence in the room. The crowd held its collective breath. No one did this to Frank Sinatra. No one. Sinatra laughed. Genuinely, deeply, helplessly laughed. And in doing so, he didn't just enjoy a joke. He anointed Don Rickles. He became Rickles's most prominent and devoted champion, introducing him to the inner circle of Hollywood royalty, endorsing him to the Rat Pack and beyond, and cementing Rickles's reputation as the one man in America who could say absolutely anything to absolutely anyone and somehow emerge not only unscathed but beloved. This moment established the fundamental rule of Rickles's comedy. The insult only works when the target is in on it. The roast only lands when everyone, including the person being roasted, understands that underneath the savagery there is genuine affection. Sinatra understood this instinctively. Dean Martin understood it. Sammy Davis Jr. understood it. Johnny Carson understood it so thoroughly that he made Rickles a near-permanent fixture on The Tonight Show, knowing that every appearance was appointment television, unpredictable, electric, and impossible to look away from. Rickles went on to appear in films including the submarine thriller Run Silent, Run Deep alongside Clark Gable and Burt Lancaster in 1958, and later in Kelly's Heroes with Clint Eastwood in 1970, demonstrating that his talents extended well beyond the comedy stage. In the 1970s, he starred in the television sitcom CPO Sharky, where his biting sarcasm found a natural home in the character of a Navy chief petty officer. And in the 1990s, a whole new generation discovered him as the voice of Mr. Potato Head in Pixar's landmark Toy Story franchise, a role that delighted Rickles enormously, particularly because his grandchildren were far more impressed by the talking plastic potato than by any of his decades of groundbreaking comedic work. Throughout all of it, the through line remained constant. Don Rickles connected with people. That was his art form. That was his genius. He connected by insulting, by teasing, by exposing, by pushing, and the connection was real every single time. And then there was Denzel Washington. To be absolutely clear about what is known and what is speculative, Don Rickles was not a man who nursed public grudges. He was not someone who went on record attacking fellow entertainers with genuine malice. His entire brand was built on the opposite, on the performance of hostility that was always, fundamentally, a disguise for warmth. So when people close to Rickles describe a different quality to his feelings about Denzel Washington, it is worth pausing to understand precisely what they mean. What they describe is not hatred in any conventional sense of the word. It is not the product of a personal betrayal or a professional dispute or some documented falling out between two men who once worked together. What they describe is something more psychologically interesting than that, a deep, persistent, almost existential frustration. The frustration of a man who had cracked every room he had ever entered, who had made every person he had ever targeted laugh, who had built an entire life and legacy on the premise that no human being was truly impenetrable, and then encountered someone who seemed, to Rickles' eternal bewilderment, to simply be impenetrable. Denzel Washington is, by any measure, one of the greatest actors of his generation. He carries himself with a particular quality that even his admirers sometimes struggle to define precisely. A combination of gravitas, discipline, moral authority, and fierce intelligence that radiates from him in a way that is genuinely unusual even by Hollywood standards. He is a man of deep seriousness who has spoken openly and repeatedly about his faith, his work ethic, and his commitment to the craft of acting as something approaching a sacred calling. He does not suffer fools. He does not perform for audiences that haven't earned the performance. And while he